Ethan Ward believed in order. Everything in his life followed a schedule. The gym at 6, coffee at 7, office by 8. His suits were pressed, his words measured, and his emotions neatly locked behind invisible walls. To the world, he was the man who had it all together. Steady job at an architecture firm in Seattle, calm demeanor, and a reputation for being unshakable. But beneath that smooth surface, there was something restless, something that whispered in the quiet moments he tried to ignore. He told himself emotions complicated things, that love was a distraction meant for people who didn't know what they wanted. Yet lately, even he had started to wonder if control was just another way to hide. It began on a Tuesday, an ordinary, cloudy Seattle morning, when the new marketing consultant walked in. Her name was Claire Reynolds, and from the first moment she spoke, Ethan's carefully built structure began to crack. She wasn't loud or demanding. She just had this ease about her, like someone who trusted life even when it didn't make sense. She laughed freely, spoke with warmth, and asked questions he wasn't used to answering. "Why do you always sound like you've got everything figured out?" She'd said one afternoon during a team lunch, and he'd just smiled, hiding behind his usual charm. But that question lingered. Maybe because, deep down, he knew he didn't have anything figured out. Not really. Over the next few weeks, Claire became part of his daily routine, though he'd never admit it. He noticed the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she focused, the way she carried her coffee with 2 hands like it was something precious. Ethan tried to stay detached, but his focus slipped. He'd catch himself listening to her laugh instead of the meeting agenda, or watching her eyes light up when she spoke about her travels. Every moment with her felt like a quiet reminder that there was more to life than control. There was connection, chaos, and color. And he wasn't sure if he was ready for any of it. One evening, after a long day of client revisions, Claire suggested they grab dinner before heading home. Ethan hesitated. It wasn't in his plan. He never mixed work and personal life. But something in her tone, casual, unbothered, made it sound harmless. Just dinner. Just conversation. They found a small Italian restaurant near the office, dimly lit and humming with soft music. Over pasta and shared stories, something unexpected happened. He laughed. Not the polite kind he used in meetings, but a real, unguarded laugh. And when Claire looked at him smiling, there was no judgment in her eyes, no expectation, just understanding. That night, as he drove home, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about her. He told himself it was just friendship, nothing more. But his chest felt heavy, like something inside him had shifted. For the first time in years, he didn't fall asleep easily. He kept replaying their conversation, her voice echoing in his head. "You don't have to be perfect all the time, you know." The next morning, everything felt slightly off. He tried to dive back into work, but the balance he prided himself on was gone. When he saw Claire by the coffee machine, her smile disarmed him again. "Rough night?" she teased gently, noticing the faint tiredness in his eyes. He wanted to tell her the truth, that she'd been in his thoughts all night, but that wasn't something Ethan Ward did. He gave his usual controlled reply, a small smile and a shrug. But something about her look told him she saw through it. Weeks passed, and the distance between them blurred. Their friendship deepened, filled with small moments that felt too meaningful to be coincidence. Coffee breaks that stretched too long, shared silences that said too much. Claire never pushed, but her presence made it harder for Ethan to keep pretending. And then one evening, it happened. The two of them stayed late at the office, finalizing a presentation. When the rain began outside, Claire moved to the window, watching the city lights blur behind the glass. "You ever feel like you're just holding on too tight?" she asked quietly, her reflection soft and thoughtful. Ethan joined her by the window, their shoulders almost touching. "If I didn't hold on," he said, "everything might fall apart." She turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Or maybe it would finally fall into place." Those words hit him deeper than he wanted to admit. He didn't reply. He couldn't. Because in that moment, standing inches from her, Ethan realized how much of his life had been built on fear. Fear of losing control. Fear of getting hurt. Fear of needing someone. And Claire, with her calm honesty, had just pulled that truth into the open. That night, after she left, Ethan sat alone at his desk long after the lights had dimmed. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady and relentless. Inside, his mind was louder than ever. He tried to reason with himself. This was just an infatuation, something temporary. But the thought didn't hold. Claire had become more than a passing feeling. She was the one thing he couldn't organize, predict, or manage, and maybe that's why she terrified him so much. By the time he left the building, something inside him had cracked open. He didn't know what came next, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel like running from it. And as he stepped out into the rain, her words echoed again. Maybe it would finally fall into place. That night, Ethan realized control wasn't strength. Sometimes it was a cage, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to live inside it anymore. Ethan tried to tell himself nothing had changed, but the truth was written in the smallest details of his days. He lingered at the coffee station longer than usual, hoping Claire would appear. He found himself glancing at his phone more often, half expecting her name to light up the screen. At first, he convinced himself it was simple curiosity, maybe friendship. But deep down, he knew better. Something inside him had shifted that night by the window, and pretending otherwise didn't make it less real. Claire, meanwhile, carried on as if nothing had happened, or maybe that was her way of giving him space. She still smiled when she passed his desk, still cracked quiet jokes during late meetings, but she never pushed. And maybe that's what drew him in more, her calmness. She didn't try to take control of him, didn't demand anything from him. She simply existed, warm and steady, like an anchor he didn't know he needed. One Friday afternoon, after an exhausting week of deadlines, Claire leaned over his desk and asked, "You ever take a day off, Ethan?" He raised an eyebrow, caught off guard. "I prefer to stay productive," she smirked. "That's not what I asked." Before he could respond, she added, "Tomorrow's supposed to be sunny. Come out to the lake. A few of us are going." Then she walked away, leaving him no time to give his usual excuse. He told himself he wouldn't go. He had plans, chores, errands, order. But Saturday morning came, and for reasons he couldn't quite explain, he found himself driving toward the lake anyway. Maybe he was tired of saying no to life. When he arrived, the sun was bright over the water and laughter echoed from the dock. Claire was there, sitting barefoot on the edge, dipping her toes in the lake. She looked up and smiled when she saw him, and that simple smile made something loosen inside his chest. "You made it," she said softly. "I almost didn't," he admitted, sitting beside her. "But I figured I should test what happens if I stop planning for once." The day unfolded gently. They talked about small things, music, travel, favorite childhood places. For hours, he forgot about control, forgot about the endless list of things that usually filled his mind. There was a peace in the simplicity of being with her. When the others left to grab food, Ethan and Claire stayed behind, quiet, watching the water shift in golden light. "You look different out here," she said suddenly. "Lighter," he gave a small smile. "Maybe it's the sunlight." But she shook her head. "No, it's something else. It's like you're finally letting yourself breathe." Her words hit deeper than he wanted them to. He looked away toward the horizon, trying to steady his thoughts. "I'm not good at this," he said quietly. "At what?" she asked. "At not controlling things. At letting people close." Claire's gaze softened. "You don't have to be good at it, Ethan. You just have to stop fighting it." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of water lapping against the dock filled the silence. Something unspoken lingered between them, a closeness, fragile but undeniable. Ethan didn't reach for her hand, didn't say what his heart wanted to say. But for the first time, he didn't shut the feeling down either. He let it exist, and somehow that was enough. That night, when he returned home, his apartment felt unusually quiet. The order that once brought him comfort now felt hollow. The framed plans on his walls, the perfectly aligned books on the shelf, they all looked meaningless in comparison to that afternoon by the lake. He realized he'd built his life like an architectural project, precise, predictable, and emotionally safe. But love didn't fit blueprints. It demanded something he'd never allowed before: surrender. The following week at work, the air between him and Claire carried a different energy. Subtle, but charged. She didn't mention the lake, and neither did he, but both of them knew something had changed. He caught her glancing at him during a meeting, and when their eyes met, she didn't look away. It wasn't a dramatic moment, but it was real. A quiet acknowledgement that whatever this was, it was growing. Still, old habits die hard. One evening, as they prepared for a presentation, Ethan found himself snapping at her over a small mistake in a file. The words left his mouth before he could stop them, sharp and defensive. Claire didn't argue. She just looked at him with a mix of hurt and disappointment. "You know," she said softly, "you don't have to protect yourself from me." Then she walked out, leaving him standing there, surrounded by his perfect plans and broken pride. That night, Ethan barely slept. Her words kept circling his mind, replaying over and over. He wasn't angry at her, he was angry at himself. He had promised himself he wouldn't lose control again, but that was the problem. Love wasn't something you could manage or contain. It wasn't meant to be safe. It was messy, unpredictable, and terrifying. And maybe that's why it was real. The next morning, before work, he stopped by a cafe near the office, one Claire often visited. She was there, sitting by the window with her laptop and coffee. When she saw him, she hesitated, unsure. He approached her table, his voice quiet. "I owe you an apology," he said. "You were right. I was trying to control something that wasn't meant to be controlled." Claire's expression softened, the tension melting just a little. "It's okay," she said. "I get it. It's not easy for you," he nodded. "No, but I don't want to keep living like that." They talked for an hour, maybe 2. Nothing grand, no declarations, just honesty. And when they left the cafe, walking side by side into the cool morning air, Ethan felt something inside him shift again, not a loss of control this time, but a release. He didn't know where this connection with Claire would lead. He just knew he wanted to stop fighting it. And as they walked together toward the office, sunlight breaking through the city clouds, Ethan thought for the first time in years. Maybe letting go wasn't falling apart. Maybe it was falling into place. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something close to peace. His life still followed a rhythm, but it wasn't the rigid one he used to demand from himself. He laughed more now, sometimes for no reason at all. He lingered in conversations, learned to leave emails unanswered until morning, and even took small detours after work, walks by the water, late coffees with Claire, quiet moments that didn't fit neatly into a schedule. It wasn't chaos. It was life. And he was finally living it. But peace has a fragile balance. And one Friday afternoon, that balance began to tremble. Claire had just returned from a short business trip, and Ethan had missed her more than he cared to admit. When she walked into the office, his first instinct was to stand, to meet her halfway, but he stopped himself. He still wasn't used to showing what he felt so openly. Later that day, he asked if she wanted to grab dinner after work, and she smiled, that same gentle smile that always seemed to undo him. "I'd love to," she said, "but there's something I need to tell you first." Her tone was different, careful, hesitant. Ethan tried to hide his unease. They met that evening at their usual cafe, a small corner place filled with warm light and soft jazz. But this time, Claire's eyes carried something heavy. She stirred her coffee, avoiding his gaze. "Ethan, I got offered a position," she began quietly. "It's in Chicago. It's a big step for me, a dream role, really." The words hit him harder than he expected. He didn't speak right away, just stared at the steam rising from his untouched cup. He wanted to be happy for her, he really did, but something inside him twisted. "When would you leave?" he asked finally. "A month," she said softly. "I haven't decided yet. I just wanted to tell you first." He nodded, holding his composure like a mask. "That's great, Claire. You deserve it." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. She looked at him, searching his face for something real. "That's it?" she asked. "That's all you're going to say?" He hesitated. "What do you want me to say?" Her voice broke just slightly. "I want you to be honest." Honesty. The very thing he had always avoided. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something inside him cracked open again. "I don't want you to go," he admitted quietly. "But I also don't want to be the reason you don't." For a long moment, neither of them said anything. The silence was full of everything they couldn't put into words: fear, longing, love that hadn't been named yet. Claire reached across the table and touched his hand. "You're not the reason I'd stay, Ethan, but maybe you're the reason I'd think twice." That night after she left, Ethan sat alone in his car for a long time. The rain tapped softly against the windshield, the city lights blurring behind it. This was the test. The moment life was asking if he'd go back to control or keep choosing surrender. Part of him wanted to plan, to reason, to fix it somehow. But another part The part Claire had awakened told him that love wasn't something you fixed. It was something you felt, even when it hurt. The days that followed were strange. They still saw each other, but everything carried a quiet tension. Every shared laugh felt borrowed, every look a little heavier. One evening, after everyone had left the office, Claire stood by his desk, holding a folder. "I'm accepting it," she said gently. Ethan froze. "When?" "End of the month," she said. "It's time." He nodded, trying to smile, but the truth was, he felt something inside him shatter. He'd finally opened his heart, only to watch the one person who helped him do it prepare to leave. That night, he walked home instead of driving. The city felt colder than usual, every sound distant. He kept hearing her words. It's time. Maybe it was. Maybe this was life's way of showing him that letting go didn't just mean losing control. It also meant learning how to face loss. The next morning, Claire stopped by his office, holding 2 coffees. "You okay?" she asked gently. He looked up at her, exhausted but calm. "I don't know," he said truthfully. She smiled faintly. "At least that's honest." They talked for a while, but it was lighter now, almost peaceful. Something between them had shifted again, from uncertainty to quiet acceptance. As the weeks passed, Ethan began to realize something profound, that love wasn't about holding on tightly. It was about being brave enough to let it live freely. He helped Claire prepare for her move, offered advice, even helped her pack boxes one weekend. Every goodbye inched closer, but he refused to close himself off this time. He wanted to remember this, the way her laughter filled a room, the way she saw the best in him even when he didn't. On her last night in town, they met one final time by the lake where it had all started. The sky was streaked with orange and pink, the water reflecting every shade. They sat in silence for a long time, both lost in thought. Finally, Claire spoke. "You've changed, Ethan," he smiled faintly. "You think so?" "I know so," she said. "You used to live like everything needed to make sense. Now you let things just be," he turned to her, his voice low. "You taught me that." She looked down, a tear slipping past her smile. "Then promise me something," she said. "Don't close back up when I'm gone." He nodded, unable to speak. Then, for a brief moment, she rested her head on his shoulder. The world felt still, the kind of stillness that holds both ending and beginning at once. When she finally stood, he didn't stop her. He just watched as she walked away, each step quiet but sheer. As the evening breeze swept across the water, Ethan realized something simple, yet life-changing. He hadn't lost control this time. He'd chosen to let go, and maybe that was what love truly was, and not possession, not certainty, but courage. The courage to feel deeply, even when it might hurt. Ethan watched the plane disappear into the clouds until there was nothing left but open sky. It wasn't the dramatic heartbreak he once feared. It was quieter, deeper. A soft ache that wasn't screaming, only whispering. For the first time in his life, he didn't rush to silence the whisper. He allowed himself to feel it. To grieve not just Claire leaving, but the version of himself he had lived as for so long. Controlled, guarded, always safe but never truly alive. In the days that followed, Ethan returned to work, but his life no longer revolved around deadlines and structured routines. He still worked hard, still cared about excellence, but he stopped trying to micromanage everything. He let conversations flow without rehearsed responses. He volunteered ideas even when they weren't perfect. He said yes to spontaneous plans. People around him noticed the difference. He wasn't just present, he was alive. Weeks turned into months. Claire called occasionally, their conversations warm but steady, building something real. Trust, respect, and unspoken affection that distance couldn't erase. She told him about her work, her new apartment, the lake she found in Chicago that reminded her of home. Ethan listened, not with the fear of losing control, but with the peace that comes from knowing that love doesn't disappear when it isn't possessed. It grows when it's allowed space. Then one morning, the unexpected happened. Ethan received an email from a major client praising the presentation he led, a presentation built not on perfection, but on creativity and collaboration. The firm's partners noticed, and within days, Ethan was offered a new leadership role. It was a role that would require travel, every other month to the Chicago office. He stared at the offer, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Destiny gently opening a door. That weekend, Ethan boarded a flight not with anxiety or hesitation, but with quiet excitement. When he arrived in Chicago, the city greeted him with a cool breeze and golden sunlight reflecting off the skyscrapers. He made his way to the small cafe Claire once mentioned in one of their calls. His heart beat faster, not from fear but from truth. He wasn't here seeking certainty. He was here embracing possibility. Claire arrived a few minutes later, breathless from rushing, her hair slightly windblown, eyes wide when she saw him. "Ethan?" she asked, as though she wasn't sure if he was real. He smiled, soft, unguarded, fully present. "I told you I wouldn't close back up," he said quietly. For a moment she didn't move. Then slowly a smile spread across her face, relief, joy, emotion filling her eyes. She walked toward him, not fast, not dramatic, just real. When she stood in front of him, she whispered, "So, what now?" He shook his head gently. "I don't know. And for the first time, I don't need to." They sat down, and conversation flowed effortlessly, not about what should happen, but about what felt right. Ethan told her about the new role, his travel schedule, and how he'd be in Chicago regularly. Claire listened, her eyes brightening. "So, this isn't a goodbye," she said softly. "It's not a plan," Ethan replied, "but it's a beginning." After coffee, they walked along the river, the city alive around them. At one point, Claire stopped and turned to him. "You know," she said, "you used to live like love was a problem to solve." He smiled, nodding. "I know," he said, "but you showed me it's not something to solve. It's something to experience. There were still uncertainties." They didn't label anything that day. They didn't map out timelines or make promises shaped by fear. Instead, they chose something stronger, presence. Ethan, once terrified of emotional chaos, now understood that control had never been safety. It had been limitation. And when he let go, life didn't fall apart. It opened. Over the next months, their bond deepened, not through intensity, but through gentleness. Claire visited Seattle. Ethan visited Chicago. They explored cities like they were reading chapters of a book they were writing together. One step, one chapter, one honest conversation at a time. There were moments of doubt, yes. Moments where old habits tried to return. But Ethan faced them differently now, not with resistance, but awareness. Control no longer held power over him. One evening, as they stood at the same lake where everything started months ago, Claire took his hand. It was a small gesture, but it held years of meaning. Ethan didn't overthink it. He didn't analyze or anticipate. He simply felt her hand in his and knew that whatever came next would be real. Claire looked at him, her voice soft but steady. "You're not afraid anymore, are you?" He thought for a moment. "I still feel fear," he admitted, "but I'm not letting it decide my life." She squeezed his hand gently. "That's what I've been waiting to hear." A soft breeze stirred the water. The sky was painted in hues of gold and lavender, the world quiet around them. In that stillness, Ethan finally understood. His real journey hadn't begun when he met Claire. It had begun when he stopped trying to control everything. When he allowed his life to unfold instead of forcing it into shape. When he chose love not as a guarantee, but as an act of courage. And in that moment, standing beside the woman who had unknowingly changed his life, Ethan Ward realized something beautiful. Letting go wasn't the end of who he was. It was the beginning of who he was always meant to be.